Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to another video on my channel. My name is Josh Fan of ShowMeFootball.com, and we got some Mizzou news to talk about. So I wanted to make a video on this yesterday, but never got around to it just because I had so much other going on. And since I also cover the Chiefs and the Chiefs played yesterday, I mean, you get the whole deal. Anyway, Mizzou football fired defensive line coach Jethro Franklin on Sunday afternoon, right in the middle of the Chiefs game, actually, when I got the news. So they were kind of slick about it, but yeah, the team also released a statement following the firing of Franklin yesterday. They said, after a careful review, I believe a change in direction at the defensive line coach was needed, Drinkwitz said. Jethro is a professional and man of high character, and we wish him all the best moving forward. Defensive analyst Al Davis will move into a full-time coaching role with the defensive line for the rest of the 2021 season. So my first reaction when I heard this news, or I read it on Twitter, was, okay, so it looks like Jethro Franklin is going to be the fall guy for right now for Mizzou's defensive struggles. I'm not necessarily sure Jethro Franklin was the problem, although the hire was kind of out of left field, and he had been sitting out of football for a year before being hired by Mizzou. Kind of similar to Steve Wilkes. He did not have a job for the past year before Mizzou brought him in as DC, but we'll get to Steve Wilkes here in a minute. Essentially, it looks like Franklin is going to be the sacrificial lamb of the Mizzou defensive staff 5 games into the season. But it does kind of make sense, because if I asked you what the worst position group was on Mizzou's roster, you guys would probably say defensive line, right? Even though the secondary has been rough at times and they can't seem to tackle, I mean, there's talent in that secondary. They have some players. The linebackers, while not great, I mean, they make a play here or there. And the defensive line, I mean, the pass rush is non-existent. They get blown off the ball, it seems like, almost every single run play. Like, they are overmatched by really average opponents. I mean, it's ridiculous how bad the defensive line was. And I myself gave a pass to this defensive staff for a long time because they don't really have the talent up front or on defense in general. They're overmatched in a lot of these games. But at some point, we have to admit, look, the talent is not that bad. Like, yes, Mizzou is talent deficient on the defensive side of the ball, but they're not this bad to where they should be getting blown out by Tennessee by 40 points. I mean, Trajan Jeffcoat, Kobe Whiteside, Akil Byers, those were all players that, you know, we thought they're all decent at one point or another, or have flashed at one point or another. Like, Trajan Jeffcoat was an all-SEC defensive lineman last year. I haven't heard his name all year. Like, what has he done? So, you know, you wouldn't have a hard time convincing me that maybe Jethro Franklin wasn't coaching these guys up very well because they just have completely regressed. Like, I don't think all those names are outstanding players, and I don't think Mizzou's defensive line depth is anything special, but it's got to be better than getting blown out by Tennessee by that bad, you know? I kind of feel like, though, that this firing is kind of a precursor to Steve Wilkes maybe getting canned. I just feel like this was Mizzou's, again, this was Jethro Franklin kind of being the sacrificial lamb when the problems go a little bit deeper than just the defensive line coach. Like, look, I'm not saying Jethro Franklin was a great coach, and I think this move should light a fire and help change things, and you know, maybe getting a new fresh face in there, some new perspective with the defensive line will help things, and maybe the team will be better moving forward. I mean, I would hope so, because there's nowhere to go but up. I mean, literally, they rank 129th out of 130 college football teams in rush defense. And, yeah, I mean, you can only go up from here. But I even came to a realization on Saturday after the Tennessee game that maybe Steve Wilkes isn't the guy. Again, I gave him a pass to this point because I thought the talent just wasn't there. And I still don't think the talent is there. And I think with better talent, this Steve Wilkes defense would look a little bit better. But again, at some point, we have to be realistic and say the talent is not this bad. It is not that bad. I mean, Ryan Walters last year had Drake Heismeyer, a true freshman offensive lineman, playing D-tackle for this team against Mississippi State, and Sean Robinson, a former quarterback, was their best safety. I mean, and look, And I'm not saying Ryan Walters' defense was good, but I don't ever remember seeing it that helpless against an opponent like it was against Tennessee on Saturday. To me, Tennessee is the weakest team on their schedule besides SEMO, and Mizzou looked like they didn't even belong on the field with Tennessee, and it was their worst game of the season. And then Wilkes went with that whole 3-3-5 defense against Tennessee with Jatorian Hansford, who doesn't play starting at middle linebacker. Like, whose idea was that? And it clearly didn't work. And I kind of question what the heck Steve Wilkes is doing. And, I mean, it almost seems like that a lot of these players don't know where to be lined up, and there's a lot of confusion. And it seems like Steve Wilkes' defense is maybe a little too complicated for college players to get down, and I think he might need to consider that going forward. Obviously, a lot of people would say that firing Steve Wilkes, if it gets to that point and nothing improves, would be a bad look on Drinkwitz because, that was his handpicked guy, and firing him and saying that he screwed up only 5 or 6 games into the season would be a bad look. And while I tend to agree it is a bad look, at the same time, Drinkwitz is going to look even worse if he keeps Steve Wilkes around for longer than he has to, and this defense continues to just go on this downward spiral. And if I'm being real, I would still give Drink a pass because it's okay to admit that he messed up and hired the wrong guy. I know he's the CEO of this football program, and he has to take some responsibility for the defensive struggles. And then if he fires Steve Wilkes and brings in another guy and it's still not fixed, then Drinkwitz's seat gets hot. But, I mean, we all knew Drinkwitz was an offensive guy. He kind of leaves the defense to the defensive coordinator. We all said that Steve Wilkes is essentially the head coach of the defense. But I would understand if it gets to the point where they have to fire Steve Wilkes and Drinkwitz just has to say, hey, I messed up. I brought in the wrong guy. I really hope it doesn't get to the point where we have to fire Steve Wilkes because I was always a fan of the hire. And I really like Steve Wilkes, but it's not looking good. It's not looking great for Steve Wilkes. There's a real possibility he gets fired in year 1 if nothing changes. But for now, Jethro Franklin is the guy Mizzou is going to lay a lot of the blame on, and they're going to go from there and see what happens. I'm still not totally sure what to think. I mean, again, Mizzou doesn't have a ton of talent. I mean, this is a defense that was horrible last year, and they lost, 3 or 4 starters to the NFL, so that doesn't help. Drinkwitz hasn't had a ton of time to get his guys in here yet. Same with Wilkes. I mean, Wilkes was just hired, and Drinkwitz, his first full recruiting class, is only freshman right now, so, it's a two-way street with the talent, but also the talent shouldn't always be the excuse for being this bad. I feel like there is some coaching issues going on too. But those are my overall thoughts on the firing of Jethro Franklin. I think someone needed to be fired. I thought a change needed to happen. You couldn't just come from that game and say, look, we're not going to do anything. We still have faith in our guys. That's just, this at least, it shows that you're being proactive, in my opinion. I really do think something had to be done. And again, I don't think Steve Wilkes' job is safe now just because they made that change. I mean, look, Drinkwitz was asked after the game, have you considered making a change at defensive coordinator? And Drink didn't give an emphatic no. I mean, he said that he hadn't thought about anything like that, but that isn't exactly a vote of confidence for Wilkes. So we'll have to monitor this very closely going forward, but I would like to hear from you guys. What do you think of the Jethro Franklin firing, and do you think the problem's going to be solved now that they fired the defensive line coach, or do you think this is an ongoing development? Let me know in the comments. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe so more Mizzou fans can find this, and you can check out my work on showmefootball.com and k8kingdom.com. I'll see you all in the next one.